Bloody hell. If you thought things were crook in Talaruk before, strap in. Because what I'm about to tell you might just make your blood boil hotter than a snag on a summer barbie. Australia, our lucky country? More like ripped-off country. Run by a bloke who talks a big game but delivers less than a footy team without a coach. Yeah, I'm talking about Anthony Albanese, Albo, the man who promised us hope and handed us housing nightmares. We didn't vote for chaos, mate, but that's what we bloody got. Before we rip into this Albanese disaster class, where full-time workers sleep in cars, rents hit $700 a week, and Albo pretends everything's fine from his taxpayer-funded palace. Smash that like button, like you're evicting the whole Labour Party from Parliament. Subscribe if you're sick of the lies, the spin, and the smug press conferences. And grab the Tax Me If You Dare tea. Wear it to the next rent protest, budget breakdown, or just your local servo while wondering why Anthony Albanese still has a job. Shirt's in the description. Keep the rage real. So here's the kicker. Right now, across this sunburnt country, we've got working Aussies sleeping in cars, tents, and dodgy motels. Not junkies or bludgers, but teachers, nurses, and ambos. Full-time workers with steady jobs who still can't afford a roof over their heads. Let that sink in. We're not talking about just a handful here. Over 122,000 Aussies were homeless in 2024, and a massive chunk of them were employed. But where's Albo? Off playing global diplomat, shaking hands in Beijing, while families back home can't even find a damn car park to sleep in without getting fined. This isn't just a crisis. It's a full-blown national disgrace. And the worst part? They're gaslighting us. Albanese gets up there in Parliament, suits crisp, tie tight, smiling like a footy team just won a grand final, pretending everything's under control. Mate, get real. Rents have gone up over 35% in some places. A 2-bedroom shoebox that used to cost $350 a week is now pushing $700. And don't get me started on power bills, paying more to boil a bloody kettle than fill your tank. Meanwhile, wages. Flat as a dead kangaroo on the highway? Now let me tell you about Jessica, a full-time nurse in Melbourne, earning just shy of $80,000 a year. Sounds decent, right? Wrong. She lives in her car. Her car, mate. With her 10-year-old son. Rent shot up so much she had to make a choice. Keep a roof or keep her son in school. So now every night, she parks somewhere quiet and prays she doesn't get hassled by cops or worse. That's the Australia Anthony Albanese built. And before you say, oh well, that's Melbourne, let me remind you, this is happening in Sydney, Perth, Brisbane, even backwater towns like Tamworth. No one's safe unless you already own a house. Or 5. Here's a dirty little secret the media doesn't like to air. Homelessness services. They're cooked, burnt out. 83% of calls go unanswered. 40% of shelters have to shut their doors during opening hours. Families rock up for help and get told to piss off. Imagine that. Turning away kids because the government can't fund enough beds, but we've got billions to throw at defense deals that fall through faster than Albo's approval ratings. You know what this is? It's economic warfare, and we're losing. The middle class is getting gutted, while Albanese and his Labour mates keep feeding the investor class like it's Christmas every day. Negative gearing, capital gains loopholes, housing being gobbled up by cashed-up boomers and overseas buyers. How's a 25-year-old tradie ever meant to compete with that? Unless you've got rich parents or married into money, you're screwed. And the worst bit, no one's coming to save you. Meanwhile, Albo's gallivanting around like some kind of rock star statesman. One day he's in Washington, wagging his finger at Trump like that's going to help anyone pay rent back home. Next day, he's in Beijing, all cuddles and panda diplomacy, pretending like China's not buying up half our land and jacking up property prices in the process. It's a bloody clown show, and we're the ones paying the ticket price. Let me take you down the rabbit hole a bit further. There's this bloke, works 3 jobs. Insurance by day, Uber Eats, and DoorDash at night, plus cranks out YouTube vids in between. Works 70 bloody hours a week. And guess what? He still can't afford a proper home. Not even a dodgy share house. You think that's sustainable? You think that's what our grandparents fought wars for? Number That's what happens when the government turns housing into a monopoly board and chucks the dice into a hedge fund. Look, I know some of you still reckon Albo's heart's in the right place. Maybe he means well. Maybe he wants to fix things. But here's the cold, hard truth. Intent doesn't matter when people are freezing in their cars and skipping meals to feed their kids. And what's Labor's grand plan? A few token housing schemes here and there, maybe some rent relief that wouldn't even cover your Wi-Fi bill. Meanwhile, property developers are popping champagne, knowing full well the game's rigged in their favour. Now let's get real for a sec. You want to retire someday, right? Have a crack at the Aussie dream. Backyard, dog, maybe a tinny in the driveway. Forget it. Pensioners right now can't even retire. They're working till they drop dead because superannuation dried up and rent won't wait. If our elderly can't stop working, what hope do the rest of us have? You're not retiring, mate. You're just renting your way to a slow death. And Albanese? He's too busy cutting ribbons and doing photo ops to notice or care. But here's what really makes my blood boil. We were promised better. Albo campaigned on change, on fairness, on rebuilding trust. Instead, we got more of the same, only with better PR and worse execution. He sold us dreams and delivered nightmares, wrapped in eco-packaging and tax spin. He talks about inclusion, while the country's dividing into the haves and have-nots. He says he's pro-worker, while workers are sleeping in their bloody hatchbacks. We've got international students taking up rentals by the dozen just to split costs, pushing locals further out into the sticks. We've got FIFO workers camping in car parks because housing near job sites is unaffordable. And guess who benefits? Not you, not me, but the same elite crowd that throws money at Labor and Liberal alike and laughs all the way to the bank. It's a stitch-up from top to bottom, and Anthony Albanese is sitting at the centre like a king on a crumbling throne. There's even stories of cops moonlighting as Uber drivers, paramedics selling plasma to cover rent, teachers bunking in spare rooms, and caravans because their wages can't keep up with rent. Teachers, mate, the ones who shape the next generation, and we treat them like garbage. If that's not national failure, I don't know what is. But the media? Silent. They'll give Albo a pat on the back for some new climate initiative, a headline about cost of living relief, then move on while the working class drowns. It's all spin, all fluff. Albanese gets to play the hero while Aussies scrape by on 2-minute noodles and charity petrol vouchers. That's not leadership. That's bloody abandonment. You want a perfect example of how broken this system is? Try finding a rental on minimum wage in any capital city. Go on. I dare ya. Spoiler alert, you won't. There is not one single suburb where someone on the minimum wage can afford a standard 1-bedroom rental without going into housing stress. Not one. That's what we've come to. A country where full-time workers are priced out of existence, while pollies like Albo get taxpayer-funded housing, chauffeurs, and gold-class flights. And here's the most gut-wrenching part. There's no emergency coming to save us. No cavalry riding over the hill. Just more government reviews, committees, consultations, and promises that go nowhere. Meanwhile, more Aussies fall through the cracks. More kids sleep rough. More families are forced to choose between food and rent. And we're all just meant to accept it? Nah. Not on my watch. So if you're watching this, and you're angry, good. You bloody should be. Because this is your country being sold out, your future being shredded, your kids' future being sacrificed for short-term profit and political points. Anthony Albanese didn't inherit this disaster. He amplified it, took a bad situation, and made it worse with delay, deflection, and denial. And it's time we called him out, loud and clear. We left off talking about how Albanese and his mob have all but turned their backs on working Aussies. But what you need to understand is, we're not just talking about policy failure anymore. This is cultural betrayal. It's deliberate, it's systemic, and it's getting baked into the bones of our so-called fair go nation. See? When the average Aussie's out there working themselves to the bone, barely keeping the lights on, Albo's popping over to global summits, smirking for the cameras and handing out green energy slogans like they're fairy floss at the Easter show. Don't get me wrong, we all care about the planet. But what good's a carbon-neutral Australia if half the bloody population's living under a tarp next to a servo? We've got Albanese talking about new beginnings and modern Australia. But this isn't the future we signed up for. It's not progress when owning a home is more of a fantasy than winning the lottery. It's not reform when you've got middle-class workers lining up at Centrelink for emergency rent relief like we're living through the Great Depression. That's not a future. It's a failure wrapped in buzzwords. Now here's something that'll blow your mind. While thousands of Aussies are homeless, Albo's government is flogging off public land to developers. That's right, selling the very spaces where we could build affordable housing to big corporations who turn them into unaffordable apartments with river views and rooftop pools for overseas investors. Meanwhile, the people who build those apartments, tradies, sparkies, brickies, they can't even afford to rent near the job site. It's exploitation on a national scale. You want to know how rigged this system is? Check this. There's an estimated 1 million vacant homes across the country. 1 million. Ghost houses bought as assets, left empty to appreciate in value while families sleep in cars and pensioners share mouldy flats. And what's Albo doing about it? Bugger all. No vacancy tax. No crackdown. Just silence. And if you speak up, if you call out the corruption, you're branded divisive, radical, anti-Australian. Nah, mate. What's un-Australian is letting billionaires hoard homes while teachers can't get a lease without offering 6 months of rent upfront. That's not free market. It's feudalism dressed up as democracy. Now let's talk about immigration. Because nobody wants to touch this with a 10-foot pole. But I will. It's not about blaming migrants. Migrants are the lifeblood of this country. They work the jobs no one else wants, keep our hospitals running, and open the best bloody food joints in town. But what happens when we bring in 500,000 people a year without building enough homes, roads, hospitals, or schools to match? You get pressure. You get shortages. You get chaos. And who cops it? Not the rich. Not Albo. It's the working class. The renters. The young families. The single mums. But Albanese won't admit that. Won't even acknowledge the imbalance. Instead, he uses multiculturalism as a shield, waving it around to silence critics while the system underneath crumbles like a dry Anzac biscuit. It's cowardice dressed up as compassion. Now look, I'm not here to peddle doom and gloom for the sake of clicks. I'm here because the truth is uglier than anything the nightly news is willing to touch. The rise of the working homeless isn't a story, it's a warning. A red flashing siren that the foundations of our society are eroding faster than the Murray-Darling. And it's not just homes either. It's our entire safety net. Try getting into a bulk billed doctor lately. Try calling Centrelink. Try navigating the NDIS if you've got a disability. It's a bureaucratic nightmare designed to wear you down, shuffle you into a corner, and tell you to try again later. Meanwhile, Albanese and his media mates spin headlines about record investments in health and landmark social reform. It's like slapping a fresh coat of paint on a house that's already been eaten by termites. Here's a brutal truth. Anthony Albanese talks like he's the Battler's PM, but he governs like a banker in disguise. Labor might have once stood for workers, but under Albo, they've turned into corporate concierge service with a red rose logo. They protect property speculators. They feed the universities cash while students live off instant noodles. And every time the Reserve Bank jacks up interest rates to fight inflation, it's renters and mortgage holders who get smashed, not investors with 10 properties. And don't even get me started on the banks. During the pandemic, we handed them billions in bailouts and leniency. But when people started defaulting on their mortgages in 2023 and 2024, the banks came knocking. Foreclosures went up. So did repossessions. You miss one payment and you're toast. Where was Albo? Nowhere. He was too busy approving corporate mergers and smiling for the cameras at the G20. Let's talk about the mental health toll for a second. Working class Aussies are burnt out, stressed, exhausted. You can't sleep when you don't know if the rent's going up next week. You can't focus when your kid needs new school shoes, but you're already behind on your power bill. And the government? Their answer is a half-baked mental health hotline that takes 6 weeks to respond. Self-care doesn't mean anything when your fridge is empty. You know what's wild? People used to laugh at the idea of civil unrest in Australia. Not anymore. We've had rent strikes, we've had flash mobs outside Parliament, we've had protesters chaining themselves to real estate offices. And it's not just fringe groups anymore, it's nurses, ambos, retail workers. Regular Aussies saying, enough's enough. And what does Albo do? Sends out a spokesperson to talk about economic headwinds, like it's a bloody weather forecast. Mate, it's not a breeze, it's a bloody cyclone. And you're out here handing people umbrellas made of tissue paper. Now, some of you might be thinking, all right, this is bad, but what's the fix? And that's the question, isn't it? The answer starts with admitting that the system is broken. We need housing to be a human right, not a casino chip. We need rent caps, vacancy taxes, and real penalties for leaving homes empty while people freeze on the footpath. We need to build social housing like it's a wartime emergency, not 2 projects a year so Albo can cut a ribbon and call it progress. We need wage reform, a real living wage, not just crumbs handed out before an election. If you work full-time in Australia, you should be able to afford food, rent, and a weekend at the beach. That's not radical, that's bloody basic. And for the love of Vegemite, we need to stop treating property investors like endangered wildlife. If you own 5 houses and leave 3 empty, you shouldn't get a tax break. You should get a bloody fine. Housing is for living, not hoarding. But most of all, we need leadership. Real, gutsy, unapologetic leadership that puts people before profit. Not another career politician who spent more time in university clubs than on a work site. Anthony Albanese had the chance to be that leader. To be the guy who looked the housing crisis in the eye and said, not on my watch. But he didn't. He blinked. He backed down. And now we're the ones paying the price. I know this is heavy, but I'm not here to make you feel hopeless. I'm here to wake you up. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You start asking questions, you start pushing back, and that's what they're afraid of. That's why they drown us in spin, distractions, and bloody influencer campaigns about how renting builds resilience. Give me a break. So next time you see a slick Albanese press conference or a puff piece about affordable living initiatives, remember Jessica in her car. Remember the nurse who treats your mum's cancer, but can't find a flat close to the hospital. Remember the truckie sleeping in his cab because there's no rentals left under $500 a week. Remember the millions of Aussies living paycheck to paycheck, wondering how the hell things got so bad in such a rich country. And then ask yourself, who's this country really working for? Because if it's not working for us, it's time we made some bloody noise. Subscribe. Share this with someone who thinks the system still works, and for God's sake, don't let Albanese get away with another press release full of fairy tales and fluff. The future of Australia depends on us waking the hell up. And if you're still watching, I want you to do something bold. Not just sit there nodding. Stand up. Talk to your mates. Email your local MP. Show up at council meetings. Make noise. Because the louder we get, the harder it is for them to pretend we don't exist. They might have the media. They might have the banks. But we've got the numbers. And we've bloody well had enough. See you in the next one. And don't forget to slap that like button, like it just doubled your rent and told you to be grateful. Oi, and if you're really fired up, grab the tax me if you dare, T. Wear it to the next rent strike, the next emergency housing meeting, or just your local servo while trying to work 3 jobs and still sleep in your bloody car. Stay loud, stay awake, and never stop fighting for the Australia they're selling out from under us.